With the newly released LEGO Dungeons & Dragons set hitting store shelves, but being way outside my price range, I've been inspired to take on building a custom D&D character of my own. So today, let's build a brooding dragonborn ranger, and even a fearsome wolf sidekick. Let's start off with this old LEGO Harry Potter dragon, which has a head part I want to use here for our character. I just gotta get it off somehow. There we go. Okay, let's replace these large horns with some smaller ones. And next, for the lower jaw, I'm turning to another prefab head with this Chima saber-tooth jaw. Let's pull that off and combine the two together. I like that the white lower jaw looks like a beard when paired with the dragon upper jaw. Now, we gotta attach them together. The lower jaw has no normal connection points, so I'll use 2 minifigure neck brackets and a Technic brick to span the jaw. To that, I'll add a bar plate and some robot arms. Then, a T-bar and a half pin can allow for the top jaw to attach in, since it conveniently has a connection point. Up next, I'll add a socket to the underside, which we can use later to attach our neck. Since this guy's a D&D character, I want to give him some artifacts he's collected over time, starting with this necklace from LEGO Scala. I'll secure it in place with 2 clips. For a second necklace, I have this lightning charm from a LEGO Dots bracelet. I'll clip it into a chain as a sort of powerful artifact. Then, I'll secure it onto the back of the head. And with that, our head's complete, and we can move on to our ranger's torso. Here, I'll start with 2 shoulder armor plates we can use as pecs. Let's work on some structure to attach them to. To an axle, I'll add a ball joint, some lift arms, and a connector. Afterwards, I'll build up a neck, which we can finish off with a small ball joint and a tire. Then 2 shells can clip on to attach in the chest. We need some more connection points if we want our ranger to have arms and legs. I'll start off by building up some shoulder connections. This Technic skeleton will allow for this all to connect together. I usually figure this stuff out with lots of iteration, so that I get something that gives me the connection points I need, and is sufficiently strong. These videos make it look a little more straightforward than it is behind the scenes, where I go back and forth a lot on which connectors and joints to add in. Now, we can attach these shoulder joints to the chest subassembly. There's this Star Wars buildable figure part I want here on the neck, but it's got no connection points of its own, so I'll leave it off for now until we can secure it in place properly. For the bulk of the body, I'm going to use this Ben 10 torso. I'll add a few Technic bits here, and then we can lock the chest in place. Then I'll clip this shell in to cover the side. I want to design a kimono for our ranger. We can start the kimono with this tattered sail part, but I'll leave his bow arm out to show that he means business in epic anime fashion. Now, I'll add in some bars and plates to connect in the sail. To attach the shoulder, I'll use this pneumatic fitting and some robot arms. I'll clip that in and attach the sail with a T-bar. Now, let's return to the neck part and lock it in place with some collarbones assembled from a spike, robot arm, and bar plate. We can detail the kimono with this long flag part, which I can fold in half so that we only see the red. I'll add it to the same T-bar as our sail, and then lock the other end in by pinning it between 2 plates. I like the pop of color that this adds to our build. I do want to armor up his bare shoulder a little. We can do so with a Knight's Kingdom armor. I'll add a bar and a shell so that it can clip in place. Then, I'll add some attachment points to the back that we can use for later things, such as a tail and a sword. Since we're going with a kimono style design here, I think it's important to build up his upper legs at this point so that everything ties together nicely. I'll start by adding 2 friction extenders to this long double socket. Then, let's connect a pair of pins, connectors, and an axle. I'll slide a Technic panel on, and then lock it in place with a bushing. Next up, we can start with an even larger Technic panel. Let's add some pins to it. We can use the half pins to attach in a pair of feathers. Then, this large panel can attach into the rest of the upper leg. I'll add in a wing part, and then detail the back of the leg by adding a ball joint to connect a large shell. I've done something similar, with a few differences for the left leg. Now, with the two of them done, we can clip them into the torso. There's a few gaps to fill yet, but we're starting to get there. Let's fill one gap by building up a belt using these old hinge joints. Now we can connect this around the waist. Afterwards, let's add a second flag for some more red detail. We can just pin the loose end in place with a plate. Next up, I want to give him another belt with this brown flexible part. I have some Scala wine bottles, which can serve as whatever fantasy beverage you have in mind. I'm torn between them being bottles of ale and potions. In any case, we can connect this new belt into the rest of the build to round out the torso before we move on to building up his arms. Let's start with this socket and an axle. I'll add a large cone and a ball joint. Then, a T-bar can connect this shell. We can round out the bicep with a road sign. And for the forearm, I have a Ben 10 part we can use. Here, we can add two sizes of ball joints to one another for the wrist. After, I'll build up an assembly around a curved slope to cover up the hollow side of the Ben 10 part. For the hand, I'll add some Among Us plates to this socket. Then, I'll cover the back of the hand up and add in a pair of robot arms and spikes for fingers. For the thumb, I'll attempt to add another robot arm, but tragedy strikes with this brittle brown and my part breaks. Learning from my mistake here, I'll slide this robot arm on rather than clipping it in. With the hand done, let's assemble the arm together. And now that we have an arm, we need a weapon for it to be holding. Since our Dragonborn here is a ranger, I'm thinking a bow is in order. We can start the bow with a dragon tail and a trunk part to get a nice curve. Then we can build up the handle with some connectors where we can hide away this red pin. After, some triaxles and a few more connectors can give us an attachment point for the limbs of the bow to attach in. For the string, I'm going to use this zipline part. First, I need to force it onto these elephant trunks. And then we can reattach the trunks in. Kinda fun that it can actually be dry fired like a real bow. Next, let's add some ornate details to the bow. First, by using these armor parts, and then by adding a dragon arm. I'll mirror that over to the other side before we add two large spikes to the trunks. After, let's add in a spot to knock the arrows. So that we can clip this into the hand, I want to add a minifigure neck bracket, which means we have to look at that red pin one last time. But all's better now that we can reconnect the bow together. Now, I'm thinking we need to construct some arrows to go along with this bow. For the fletching, I'm going to need 4 minifigure hands. Luckily, this villain has us covered. Let's attach these to this rod. Then let's extend it with some staff hilts and another rod. For the arrowhead, we can use this large spike. I want to construct a little quiver of these while we're at it. So I've built up 2 more arrows we can connect together with a round plate. For the tail, I'm returning to our Harry Potter dragon for a bit more minor cosmetic surgery. I'll remove the existing tail end and extend it with some more dino tails. Then I'll cap it off with a spike. After, I'll build up a little assembly, which we can use to connect the tail into the torso. With that installed, the tail is done. His right arm will be different from the one we already built, since it's inside the kimono. So to build it up, I'll use a stopper axle and a ball joint, then slide on a large cone and a socket. After, I'll add in a pair of bar plates to connect this wheel well part. For the forearm, I'll again use a Ben 10 part, this time in black, as well as a pair of ball joints for the wrist. The hand is the same design as the other arm, but I've swapped out a few parts to be a black glove. I'll connect it in, and then for the sleeve cuff, I'm going to use some more wheel wells, to which I'll add some curved slopes. I can attach them in by sandwiching the rest of the arm between our assembly and a second wheel well. Let's connect the 2 halves together to finish our right arm. Why limit ourselves to 1 weapon for this ranger when we could have 2? Let's build up a sword, starting with this katana blade. We can add some minifigure armor as a guard, and then add some connectors for the hilt. I like to imagine that whoever is playing as this D&D character got really into Game of Thrones for a bit and designed the pommel of the sword to be like Jon Snow's. To do that, I have this bionicle minifigure head, which we can use. I'll add one more detail to the sword with this printed tile. But since the bow is going to be the main weapon here, we need some way for this sword to be safely held. We need a scabbard. To start, I'll use this large plastic part from I don't know what. If I fold it in half, then it'll hold our sword nicely. To affix it together, I'll use some inkwells and hollow studs. Then, I'll add a little structure here, so that we can clip it onto the back of our Dragonborn. All that's left is to slide the sword into place, and we can move on to the lower legs. For the feet, I'll start with these large prefab claws, which I'm praying aren't brittle brown. I'll clip in a ball joint, and then add a connector so that a bullrock foot can connect over top. Then, I'll attach in a corrugated tube, and connect a claw to it, before adding some robot arms, for more spikes for the rest of the claws. We have a problem that this bullrock foot is flopping around right now. We can fix it in place with some round plates and rods to stop the rotation. Then to add some friction to the bottom of the feet, I'll add in a rubber lift arm, and we can use some brown stopper axles to connect it in. For the lower leg, I'll use a Paraka shin, which we can tile off by first adding some half pins. I'll connect them together to finish off our leg. That talk before about Jon Snow has got me thinking that it'd be even better if we gave our protagonist a wolf companion of his own. We can start its head with some robot arms, which we can add a few spikes to. Then I'll clip two plates together, which can fit into the opening we just created with the spikes. For the nose, I'll use these minifigure binoculars, which we can add some spikes to. Let's clip the nose in, and then add a rod end for later. For the eyes of this doggo, let's use a hot dog. Then, I'll clip in a staff hilt, and a large Hero Factory fur part. To round out the head, let's use some of these angel wings. For the connective structure here, I need a burnt hot dog. To it, I'll add some round plates, and a pair of bar plates. Then two robot arms will give us a place to connect in the wings. With that done, we can bring the two head assemblies together and cap it off with a neck joint. Now we can turn our attention to the front legs, which can be built with a socket and some white Technic bits. Then, a robot hand can attach a rod end for the wrist joint. Another angel wing can hide away the socket. For the foot, I'll use a bar plate, snop rick, and a slope. I'll connect that in to finish the front leg. The tail, I'll construct with a number of these mixel joints for a nice flexible assembly. Then, I'll adorn it with some round plates and armor add-ons, both hexagons and more fur parts. That wraps up the tail, and we can start on the wolf's body. Here, I want to use even more fur parts, this time in white. We can start building up the structure with a round plate, some half pins, and connectors. Additionally, some bars can extend the skeleton, and a round plate can lock it together. I have some horse armor that I think would fit the bill here. To attach it, I'll use a bar plate and a robot arm. Next, I'll add in an axle so that we can add two balls for the shoulders. Then, I'll attach a snop rick and another ball joint. Afterwards, let's add in a few clips and a socket to serve as the neck connection. Then we can add on the side fur bits. We can build up the back here with some gray spikes, which I'll connect some lift arms to. I'll attach two of these spikes to a T-bar and then clip it into the body. The top of this we can cover with another fur part, but I'm running seriously low on connection points now. So let's take this off momentarily, and then build up a little clip-based assembly so that we can get another connection where we need it. Afterwards, for the back, we can attach some fur to a double socket, and then connect in a wing and a ball joint for the tail. I'll clip that in, and then work on the hips with a ball beam some axles, lift arms, and a pneumatic fitting. Finally, 2 ball joints and a fur bit can round out this sub-assembly, and we can clip it in. Next, we can add these large wings for some furry details. I'll attach them in with a clip and some minor surgery. One more set of legs is in order, so let's build up the hind ones, starting with a Hero Factory bone, shell, and fur part. The next section, I'll build up with a socket and some Technic cams. A final connector can serve as the lower leg. Then, we can cover up this section with this mask, which I'll just add a robot hand to, so that we can pin it in place here and hope it doesn't fall out. Lastly, I'll add another foot, and we can start the final assembly, beginning with the wolf legs. Then, we can lift this leg for no reason other than to connect the tail. And then, let's finish off the wolf by adding in his head. For our ranger himself, let's start off by attaching his head. Then, the lower legs can clip in. And after, his arms. Let's follow that up with a bow. And then an arrow. On the backside, let's connect in our tail. And add the extra arrows, before finishing it off with the sword. And with that, our build is done, and it's time for the beauty shots. Thanks to all the amazing people supporting me over on Patreon. And special shout out to my newest patron, Ali C. You are the building blocks that make this channel possible. If you like this video, YouTube thinks you'll enjoy this one too. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. But until then, happy building.